Coming up on Network Africa, Ghana's parliament suspends sitting for 3 weeks because of increasing coronavirus cases among lawmakers and staff. The Ugandan government announces the full restoration of internet and social media services after January's highly contested elections. Plus, the UN Security Council unanimously welcomes the formation of an interim unity government in Libya. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. Ghana's parliament has suspended sittings for 3 weeks due to an increasing number of coronavirus cases among lawmakers and staff. Speaker Alban Bagbin announced this on Tuesday that the number of lawmakers who have contracted the virus has risen to 17, while that of staff has gone up to 155. The speaker adds that sittings would resume on March the 2nd, but he says Parliament's Appointments Committee would continue with the scheduled vetting of cabinet nominees of President Nana Akufo-Addo, who won a re-election in December. Ghana has so far confirmed over 73,000 cases and 482 deaths since it reported its first case in March last year. We'll be having more on that story from Ghana, but in the meantime, the South African government has outlined its amended coronavirus immunization plans after putting on hold the AstraZeneca jabs when the trials suggested that the vaccine, which were due to be distributed, were less effective against the local variant of the virus. Health Minister Zweli Mkhize said a Johnson & Johnson vaccine would be used to immunize health workers, even though it has yet to be approved in South Africa. It is to be deployed as part of an implementation study. The minister said doses of the Pfizer vaccine had also been secured. He adds that South Africa is considering swapping or selling the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine against coronavirus, and it also has 1.5 million doses of the jab and is now considering what to do with them. Well, let's speak to our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, joining us now for more on this. Hello, Betty.
Hello, Lion.
Well, the government is considering what to do with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, swapping or selling. What is it going to be?
We don't know yet. What I understand from the early morning briefing by the health minister today is that talks are ongoing on what to do, and they're also waiting for the advice of the scientists, the committee advising government regarding what to do with what they have. And the minister mentioned the issue of swapping, and that he had received so many calls from a number of countries wanting to buy off what they have while they're looking towards the Johnson & Johnson option for the first part of the rollout. So that is where we are. The minister said he was having meetings with the WHO and had spoken to the health secretary of the UK as well, Matt Hancock, and several other people. We don't know the outcome of that meeting with the WHO yet, because he said he was leaving the briefing to go for that meeting. But they're looking at swapping for what they need, swapping what, getting what they need and giving to those who need what they have, or
Yes.
That's it.
Well, they're also talking about, like you said, they're looking at the Johnson & Johnson option to immunize health workers. But what is the assurance, that this Johnson & Johnson will not get the same fate of the AstraZeneca jab? How, confident are they about this new one they're looking to?
Well, government seems confident, just like they were the last time. But they're going on with the purchase negotiation. So we don't know. But the minister said as soon as probably next week, the first part of it. It's part of an ongoing study, but because you have a range of studies going on in the country with all the vaccines, they're doing trials, and the child scientists are the ones advising government. So the Johnson and Johnson option is what they're looking at now, which has been seen to be effective against the variant. Remember, the issue is not that AstraZeneca is not effective against coronavirus, but
Yes.
the variant, the 501Y V2. So they're looking at the Johnson and Johnson option. It's still part of an ongoing study, and they're saying the minister said subject to approval of cabinet. Cabinet usually meets Tuesdays or Wednesdays, so that meeting may have happened. But we know tomorrow the president will be having his traditional State of the Nation address, so he may give us more details as to what they have decided. But Johnson and Johnson is what's been, and there's talk about Pfizer too. But right now is the Johnson and Johnson option that seems more on the table than others.
All right, then we'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out. Thank you so much, our South African Bureau Chief, Betty Debia.
Thank you.
Well, let's go back to our top story for today. Ghana's parliament suspending sit-ins because of an increase in coronavirus cases among lawmakers and even members of staff. We have joining us now to give us more details on this story, Daniel Dadzie, Joy News TV correspondent, joining us now from Accra. Thank you, Daniel, for speaking to us on the program. What has been the reaction from, ordinary citizens to this news that the country's parliament is shut down?
Well, it's been a lot of worry, I must say. Initially, there was a lot of concern from authorities that the awareness about the reality of the COVID-19 pandemic and the reaction that is needed from the public, i.e. wearing of nose masks, observing of social distancing, and washing of hands and regular sanitizing, but not being applied by the ordinary citizens as much as they should. Now, the reaction has come mainly from the numbers that have come as opposed to the action that has been taken, being the closure of Parliament, because the closure of Parliament is as a result of 151 parliamentary staff testing positive. Also, 17 members of Parliament out of 275 have tested positive. And so there is indeed a genuine problem as far as Parliament is concerned, and it has achieved some sort of ripple effect in the sense of an increase in awareness among the population.
Well, Daniel, shutting down the Parliament is a big deal. How is, proceedings and the work expected to continue in light of this latest development?
The advantage that this parliament has is that it's very young, and the government, the executive arm of government, is also very young. We practice a parliamentary system where most of the legislation which is considered by the House is initiated by the executive arm of government headed by the president. Currently, the president has simply designated individuals who he wants Parliament to vet and then approve. So the Speaker of Parliament made it known that the Appointments Committee of Parliament, which is the 26-man committee, which is vetting the president's ministerial nominees, will continue work whilst the larger House is on recess or on a makeshift recess for the next 3 weeks. He actually said that it is believed that Parliament would not have much work to do since the executive arm of government has not been constituted, and it is hoped, and they hope that within these 3 weeks, the Appointments Committee of Parliament can vet a good number of these ministerial nominees. So when Parliament returns, they would go about the business of approving the nominees or rejecting them, depending on the work that is done by the Appointments Committee.
All right, then. Well, some African countries have begun vaccinating their citizens against, this coronavirus, while some are yet to begin, Ghana included. What's the country's stance on COVID-19 vaccines, the purchase and the eventual rollout?
So the president set up a special committee to see to it that the vaccine will reach the country. We know that orders have been made for some 19.5 million doses of the vaccine. The World Bank has promised some $12 billion to support the country in the procurement of these vaccines. Today was the day the Appointments Committee of Parliament began vetting the various ministerial nominees. The first person who was vetted was the health minister designate, who was the former health minister in the President Akufo-Addo's previous administration, Malimu. The specific question was put to him that when should we expect to see vaccines in Ghana? What he said is that from the middle of February to
Well,
early
seems
part
like...
Right. So what he was saying, if I could just restate that, we may have had some network hiccups there. What he said is that from mid-February to...
All right, we're still having those network hiccups. That's Daniel Dadzie, Joy News TV correspondent there, speaking to us about, when Ghana will be receiving its vaccines and eventually vaccinating its citizens. That's all on the COVID-19 stories that we have on Network Africa. Egypt's tourism sector is currently experiencing a boost as European tourists are fleeing their harsh winter in the countries and have been visiting the North African country. Now, this comes a week after the central bank revealed that revenues from tourism plunged to $801 million in July to September from $4.2 billion a year earlier.
Holidaymakers are escaping cold winters and lockdowns in Europe to Egypt's sunny beaches, where officials say despite the low rate of coronavirus cases, occupancy levels remain lower than before the pandemic.
We put very strict standards for the safety and hygiene. I hope if you can have a look in all hotels about the safety measures. And plus, we don't allow any client to come, any guest to come without the PCR. Plus, we do a lot of PCR tests to our employees. So we are trying to be as safe as we can. Nobody can guarantee everything, but we are doing our best. The capacity is 50%. The social distance here is very important. The face mask. So we are doing everything. Meanwhile, we are trying to let the people enjoy their time.
The tourism sector was hit by the pandemic and collapsed last year, with only 3 million tourists visiting the country in 2020, a mere 23% of the number in 2019. Egypt gradually reopened to international flights in June after stopping most of them in mid-March. But with hotels at a 50% occupancy rate, chairman of South Sinai's Investor Association, Tema Makram, says they are limited to welcoming tourists from countries that have not imposed any travel restrictions on their citizens.
Unfortunately, we have only the nationality that are allowed to travel. So mostly are Ukrainian, Belarusian, Kazakhstan, some Armenian. So it's not a lot of countries, plus some domestic, of course, the people, the Egyptians themselves, who love to come and spend the vacations here.
Tourism from Ukraine had resumed in July 2020 when the minister had announced the resumption of inbound tourism to 3 governorates, South Sinai, the Red Sea and Marsa, Mothru, and which were selected for having witnessed the lowest number of coronavirus cases in Egypt at the time.
It's great. After Ukraine winter, it's really great, and I can't imagine and I can't understand actually that I'm in Egypt. I'm in a suit where here.
Egypt has recorded a total of 169,640 cases and 9,651 deaths, according to government data.
Still to come on the program. Somalia's President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo calls for a meeting with federal state leaders to resolve the impasse on how to proceed with elections. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. The Ugandan government has announced the full restoration of internet and social media services, also apologizing for any inconveniences caused. Peter Ogwan, the State Minister for ICT and National Guidance, tweeted that the ban was necessary for the security of the country. Internet services were severely restricted on the eve of January 14th election. President Yoweri Museveni at the time accused social media companies of being arrogant and being biased. Mr. Museveni secured a sixth term in the election, but Bobby Wine, who came second, is now challenging the results in court, alleging that there was widespread fraud. Somalia's President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo has called for a meeting with federal state leaders next week to resolve the impasse on how to proceed with elections. President Farmajo's tenure ended on Monday after talks on the elections collapsed on February the 5th. However, proposed talks on Somalia's delayed election have been thrown into confusion after the authorities in Puntland region, the suggested venue for the meeting, said the negotiations should be held in the capital, Mogadishu. Opposition groups say they no longer recognize Mr. Farmajo's authority and have called for the formation of a transitional body. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council has urged Somalia's leaders to reach a consensus on the arrangements for the conduct of inclusive elections with a view of holding them as soon as possible. The members of the Security Council also welcomed efforts made by the leaders of the federal government of Somalia and the federal member states to find agreement on the implementation of the September 17 electoral model.
The members of the Security Council welcomed the efforts made by the leaders of the federal government of Somalia and the federal member states to find agreement on the implementation of the 17 September electoral model. They noted the progress made, but expressed concern that the talks in Dusamareb ended without agreement. They commended the role of the African Union in promoting dialogue between Somalia's parties. The members of the Security Council called for Somalia's leaders to resume their dialogue urgently and work together in the interests of the people of Somalia to reach consensus on the arrangements for the conduct of inclusive elections with a view to holding them as soon as possible, and in that regard noted the announcement of further talks on the 15th of February. The members of the Security Council condemned terrorist attacks by al-Shabaab. They reaffirmed their support for national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of Somalia.
Well, let's get more on this story from Somali journalist joining us now, Mohamed Malimu from Mogadishu. Thank you for speaking to us on the program. Tell us, what is the mood like in the country at the moment with this electoral impasse, especially as President Farmajo's tenure has ended?
Well, I am currently now the spokesperson of the federal government of Somalia. So what's going on now that is that Somali leaders are now, convening a meeting that will happen on February 15. That will all federal government leaders and member states will be taking part. So we hope that there will be an agreement. Because now the government had done enough to deal with opposition and also member states, some of the member states, but now issues are now near to be resolved, and we hope that it will go through, and next meeting will be happening in the next week probably.
All right, just like you said, we're expecting a meeting for the 15th of February in Puntland, but there appears to be some sort of confusion as the opposition says it wants, the meeting to hold in Mogadishu for its own reasons. What are those reasons?
No, actually, the meeting was announced by the president of Somalia, Mohamed Farmajo, and some of the oppositions were suggesting in some other places in Somalia. But it's not important that it should be somewhere in Somalia. So it can be anywhere, but the president is committed that Somali leaders will come together and will finalize the issue of election, because there has been a deadlock, there has been differences, despite the government had tried enough to deal with the opposition. So we hope that everything will go into the right direction and everything will be resolved.
All right then, thank you so much, Mohamed Malimu there, joining us from Mogadishu. The UN Security Council has unanimously welcomed the formation of an interim unity government in Libya, describing it as an important milestone. The transitional body, comprising of a prime minister and three-member presidential council, was agreed last week. Now, it is intended to replace rival authorities in Tripoli and Benghazi. If all goes well, it will lead the country into elections this year. In a statement, the UN Security Council called for a comprehensive national reconciliation process. The country has been beset by violence since forces backed by NATO overthrew its leader Muammar Gaddafi back in 2011. As we end the program today, a building in Egypt's second largest city that was once used as a shelter in World War II has been renovated into an art gallery. The Alexandria Art Gallery offers a rare glimpse into the war's past. Take a look.
Underneath this historic building in Alexandria lies a time capsule in its own right. A shelter once used by residents during the Second World War to escape the air raids that had once reduced some of the city's structures to rubble. Today, those same dungeons and archways lead through a new life as an art space. Sealed off for 35 years, the underground shelter was reimagined and rebuilt into its current state by a real estate company and the art gallery's executive director, Shaima Ramsey, who began working on it in 2016. The shelter, with its ventilation ducts and escape channels, was built in 1928, over 10 years after the First World War, by a Greek architect when the city had been a melting pot for Mediterranean and European immigrants.
We wanted to preserve all of the space's original elements, especially the stone structures, and this was to show youth today what these important elements were and how they were around at a time these youth did not witness.
Having officially opened to the public in January 2020, the gallery hosts projects aimed at encouraging young artists to showcase their work, hold workshops, and breathe life into Alexandria's creative scene.
The
idea of being in a place that was so influential during World War II and was used as a shelter is such a strange but really great feeling, because you feel as though you are reliving the experience and feeling their feelings, especially since they have kept the space to resemble what it once was, even the arc at the entrance. So it's a retelling of the story in a wonderful way.
In celebration of a year since its opening, the space organized a series of events for around 60 artists, the majority of which were sitting natives, and has welcomed over 3,500 visitors since year 2020.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.